We look at the skyline of New York City and see an environment we assume is fully accounted for. This massive concentration of steel and concrete is anchored to a grid that we have spent over a century mapping, charting, and maintaining. That sense of total control remained the standard until late winter of 2022. It began with a standard municipal work order, a report of a minor water leak near an old subway junction deep beneath the city streets. The job was assigned to a three-man maintenance team: Marcus, a senior technician, Lewis, a structural engineer, and a new recruit named Daniel. For them, this was a routine task, guided by the same documentation that governs every other inch of the subterranean transit system. Their entire descent was dictated by official blueprints. They moved through the tunnels with the confidence of trusting a map, believing the space around them was as predictable as the streets above. When they reached the designated coordinates, the team found a physical contradiction. The blueprints called for a reinforced concrete barrier, but they were standing in front of an ancient brick wall and a rusted iron gate that had been welded shut decades ago. Marcus checked the municipal records, but this section of the tunnel was completely missing from the archives. It was a spatial void in the city's data, a structure that simply shouldn't have been there. Despite the breach of protocol, they decided to investigate. Lewis used a grinder to sever the rusted weld on the gate, physically opening a path into the unmapped dark. As the gate swung open, the environment changed instantly. The temperature dropped significantly, and the air that escaped the tunnel was dry and carried a scent of ancient, stagnant dust. By passing through that gate, the team stepped beyond the reach of the city's oversight and into a corridor that did not officially exist. The passage narrowed as it sloped deeper into the earth. The team noticed an acoustic shift. The sound of their footsteps was being absorbed by the walls rather than echoing, creating a heavy, suffocating silence. They eventually reached a wider chamber, where their lights revealed a horrific sight. Scattered across the floor were dozens of human bones, pale and brittle, lying exposed on the cold stone. Daniel reached out to examine a skeleton, but as his finger made contact, the bone instantly disintegrated. It didn't break. It crumbled into fine ash, suggesting a level of decay that defied standard biological timelines. Lewis's equipment began to fail. His topographical scanner showed the chamber walls warping and shifting in real time, the geometry of the room expanding and contracting while the team stood still. The environment wasn't a static, forgotten tomb. It was a physically unstable zone, shifting its dimensions as they stood within its center. Then, a new sound emerged from the deeper darkness, a rhythmic, uneven clicking, like something hard tapping repeatedly against the stone floor. Daniel moved toward the sound, entering a secondary tunnel. His flashlight illuminated what looked like wooden support beams lining the narrow walls. When his light hit the supports, he realized they weren't wood. These were massive, fused human femurs, stacked vertically and embedded into the rock to serve as load-bearing columns for the tunnel. Daniel caught a glimpse of movement in the periphery, a thin, skeletal shape held together by an unseen force, its limbs bending at impossible angles as it retreated into the shadows. This wasn't just a burial site. The bones were being used as raw building materials, fueling an architecture that was actively expanding deeper into the earth. The clicking sound suddenly intensified, multiplying into a chaotic swarm that filled the tunnel. Daniel panicked and began to run blindly back toward the entrance. Daniel was overtaken in the dark. As he fell, the loose bones on the floor began to slide toward him, rapidly locking together and forming a complex, rigid structure that grew directly over his body. From the darkness, multiple skeletal constructs emerged. They moved with a unified, synchronized speed, closing off the path like a single, coordinated machine. As Marcus and Lewis reached the gate, a mass of interlocking bone fragments erupted from the tunnel wall. It snagged Lewis and violently pulled him backward, dragging him into the abyss before Marcus could reach out. The process was clinical. The entity was harvesting biology to reinforce its masonry, turning its victims into the very walls and supports of its expanding territory. Marcus managed to force the iron gate shut, sealing the passage before collapsing onto the safety of the mapped subway platform. When an official investigation team returned to the coordinates, The gate was gone. They found only a solid, undisturbed wall of concrete where the entrance had been, as if the tunnel had never existed. The city responded by erasing the incident from the records. Team 3's logs were deleted, and Marcus was quietly removed from the workforce, turning the entire encounter into a bureaucratic ghost. Today, most people walk the streets of Manhattan without a second thought, but occasionally, if you stand in the right part of the subway, you can feel a subtle, rhythmic vibration under your feet, the sound of something still building. While the city continues to grow toward the sky, an ancient ossuary is quietly, endlessly expanding its empire in the darkness directly beneath us.